What do you think will happen to the price of silver and gold if the Chinese, or should I say when the Chinese, go to a gold-backed, gold standard type system? We've got a big mystery on our hands, folks. We've got headlines from around the world regarding the third quarter central bank purchases of gold. Nobody can figure out who bought all this gold. Almost 300 tons of gold. There's a big gap. There's a big uncertainty. Who bought the gold? I'm telling you, you don't have to be Albert Eisenhower or Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. As a matter of fact, I went all the way to Japan to get the answers, and I'm going to share it with you right now. Had you heard about the record third quarter purchases of gold by central banks? In case you hadn't, we will quickly review. The World Gold Council came out and said that just 400 tons of gold were purchased by central banks in the third quarter of 2022. That would be July, August, and September. It blew away all the previous numbers. It was a record level. As a matter of fact, the amount of gold purchased by central banks in the first 9 months of 2022 is more than any entire year's purchase until you go all the way back to 1967 when, think about this, when we were still on the gold standard. Who do you think bought all the gold? Well, speculation is flying. All the detectives in the world are coming out with their theories, and almost every single one, I don't know if you agree with this, but almost every single one is pointing their finger straight at China. Even if it wasn't you who's the mystery buyer of all that gold, I'm glad you decided to join me here in Ron's Basement. You're the most important part of Ron's Basement. I think of you when I walk down those steps. I honor the fact that one-on-one right now we are connecting. Thank you for being here. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe, leave a comment, turn on the bell. Let's get back to the meat of the video. So let's talk about a couple things in this report from the Nikkei news agency. That's like the Associated Press of Japan, very well respected. They basically said China and some other countries must be hurrying to reduce dependence on the dollar. Isn't that interesting? They want to move away from the dollar. We hadn't heard of that before now, had we? And we know that in the last quarter, there's 300 tons that are unaccounted for. The other 99 tons, they know who bought them, but there's 300 tons, and they're like, oh, we don't know who bought it. I mean, how can you not know who bought 300 tons of gold? Now, I'm going to read you something, and I have to say a Japanese name. I mentioned to you in a previous video, I struggle with Indian names. I now think that I can say I struggle even more with Japanese names, but bear with me. Koichiro Kamai, who's a financial and precious metals analyst. I don't know what that means. I think you and I are precious metals analysts. Nonetheless, he said that unspecified slice that was bought, that magnitude, that's an unheard of level of purchases. Unheard of. The Nikkei then goes on to say that speculation is swirling over the unidentified buyers. Swirling. This is a big deal, guys. This is a huge amount. I want to emphasize that one more time. We have swirling going on. Now, the next thing we get is seeing how Russia's overseas assets were frozen after its invasion of Ukraine. Anti-Western countries are eager to accumulate gold holdings on hand, said Emin Yurmazaza, a Japan-based economist from Turkey. I think that means he's from Turkey, lives in Japan, and follows the precious metals. And of course, they have to torture me with one more name, but somebody else had to chime in this article. Itsuo Tushima, he or she said China likely bought a substantial amount of gold from Russia. It gets even better. Then they go on to say China has made similar moves in the past. After staying mum since 2009, Beijing stunned the market in 2015, disclosing it had boosted gold holdings by about 600 tons. They stunned the market. Things are swirling. Unheard of. This is getting incredible. And did you know Central banks and government institutions have been accumulating gold reserves over the past 10 years or so. After the 2008 financial crisis, eroded confidence in U.S. Treasury bonds. We just talked about that in an earlier video. The U.S. debt crisis, that alone can blow up the price of gold and silver. Emerging countries with low creditworthiness are also seeking to strengthen their reserves of gold, which has high liquidity and no sovereign risk, no counterparty risk. They want to hold the gold because they're afraid that if they have counterparty risk, somebody might sanction them or something else. The world is moving toward gold. China appears to be moving towards, in my opinion, a gold-backed currency or more of a gold standard-based system. At minimum, these central banks around the world are just accumulating and hoarding gold like we've never seen in the last, 10 years, 15 years? So while they're buying gold, it goes on to say this: China has been unloading U.S. bonds. It sold $121 billion in U.S. debt, the equivalent of roughly 2,200 tons of gold between the end of February, right after Russia went into Ukraine, and the end of September. That is according to those wonderful people at the U.S. Treasury Department. But it gets even a little more incredible when we read that Chinese imports of gold from Russia surged in July, soaring more than eightfold, not sevenfold, eightfold on the month, roughly 50 times a year earlier level. And finally, we have this quote: "We think overall central banks will remain net buyers of gold, given its performance in recent years and its nature of not being another nation's liability." This came from Nikos Kavalis. I don't think that's a Japanese name. He's the managing director at Metals Focus. Congratulations, Nikos, you managing director. You probably were just a director. Maybe you got promoted to manager. Congratulations, and thank you for that wonderful quote. And finally, I appreciate you sticking with me through this video. Central banks generally do not unload their gold holdings in the market, meaning the more they buy the precious metals, the stronger the support will be for its price. Look, guys, when we look at the big picture of what's going on, the BRICS nations starting their own currency, they've explicitly said they want to back it at minimum with real assets. Well, I think, and I know, gold and silver are real assets, and I would be willing to bet that metals will be part of the plan for backing the new currency. We know that Russia is starting the Moscow World Standard, the central trading hub for metals. Why do you think they're buying all these metals? Why do you think they're selling all these treasuries? Why do you think they're starting their own currency? Why do you think they're starting their own central trading market to compete directly with the COMEX and the LBMA? I don't know. When I look at the big picture, I feel relatively confident in my investments in gold mining companies and some physical silver. You make up your own mind. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Most important, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.